10:37 and is busy engrossed in the views.
Alan has emailed in and said, please remember, we're not all going through a heat wave. It's really cool up here in Sunderland.
Oh, is it?
Mm-hmm.
Oh, sorry, Alan.
Maybe it'll warm up later in the day.
Yeah, Daryl says, I'm so sick of these nanny state warnings, treating us like we're thick. It's summertime, folks. It gets warm. It's England. It doesn't normally get warm. Or the UK, I should say.
Oh, look, listen to this one. Wedding dresses are really catching fire here. I don't mean that literally. Chrissy in Ledbury says, a few years ago, a colleague and I hosted a Wear Your Wedding Dress Again fundraiser for cancer charities. It was a huge success. People came in their favourite wedding outfit, if they hadn't got a wedding dress. A local hotel gave us use of a room. Someone made cake, and business gave some fantastic raffle prizes. The oldest bride was over 70 and still in her dress.
Oh, that's
well done.
Nice. And this one, Maureen, because I like this, because I'm an old romantic, me. In 1960, my mum and dad bought my wedding dress, second hand, cost £6. It felt beautiful, and I've enjoyed 63 happy years with a wonderful husband and still strong. Oh, Maureen.
All on a dress that only cost £6.
That melts my heart.
I tell you what, this is a lovely one. Pamela says, I put my wedding dress and veil into a builder's skip after my divorce. I regret it now, as it could have been passed on to my granddaughter. The twist is that my husband and I got back together some years later.
Ooh.
See, don't throw it away.
No. I mean, bung
it in the loft if you really don't like it anymore.
I knew a couple. It was my school friend's parents who got married and divorced twice.
To the same people got married and divorced twice.
Yeah.
That means they tried again and it still didn't work.
It still didn't work.
That's
interesting.
Yeah.
Anyway, there you go.
That's a good one for you, if you
another
want.
story. Let's go through the papers this morning with Deputy Editor of Spike, Fraser Myers, and the writer and journalist Emma Wolfe. Good morning.
Morning.
Emma.
I'm not going to tell you what I did with a former engagement ring.
Oh, yes.
No, I'm not. I'm really not going to.
You are now. You've got
Chucked it in the Thames.
Did you?
Did you?
Which was silly, really. I mean, thinking about it calmly, I could have sold it and given that money to charity.
Yeah.
It's a silly thing to do, but it felt like the right thing to do at the moment, at the time.
Okay. Well, fair enough. Fair enough.
Not a wedding dress, fortunately.
No. Sunday Times, COVID.
Well, there's long been speculation, obviously, about the source of COVID-19, obviously centering around the Wuhan Institute of Virology. And there's really interesting investigation from the Sunday Times has been uncovering proof that scientists in that lab, working alongside the Chinese military, apparently, were combining the world's most deadly coronaviruses to create a mutant virus just as the pandemic began.
Now, we've heard rumours like this before.
We have.
But this is the Sunday Times Insight team who
Yeah.
appear to have found evidence.
Yeah, they talk about a lot of evidence, hundreds of previously confidential reports, hundreds of documents, internal memos, scientific papers, and email correspondence that's been obtained through sources or through freedom of information. But we know that there's been a massive lack of transparency from the Chinese authorities. So it's been really hard to get this kind of any information out of China.
So they're not saying this created COVID-19. They're just saying it was created, whatever this was created as COVID-19.
Well, they say that it's not clear whether it was natural or elite. Fraser knows quite a lot about this, so I think he can enlighten us.
Well, it's pretty clear. I mean, a lot of people have been saying that the virus doesn't have a natural origin because it has these certain features that don't occur naturally, which have made it more contagious, which made COVID more contagious. And interestingly, the closest related virus that is natural was in this Wuhan lab. We know that people were sampling it and that they were working on it. And what I think is just as disgraceful as the kind of Chinese cover-up has been the Western cover-up. So there were scientists in the UK, in the US, who privately felt that this was probably a lab leak. Some of them had been involved in this kind of research. It's called gain-of-function research, where you sort of play with viruses. The aim actually is to save people, to develop vaccines for future pandemics. Obviously didn't work out this time.
Some had been to Wuhan and actually worked with, or at least observed, the Chinese scientists working on it.
That's right. And there was a scientist called Peter Daszak who works for a company called the Eco Health Alliance, and he'd put in a funding application to do this kind of research on bats about coronaviruses in the Wuhan Institute of Virology. There's Jeremy Farrar, formerly of the Wellcome Trust, now a Chief Scientific Director of the WHO. He privately felt that it was 50-50, that it was likely to be a lab leak, but he and Daszak and other scientists organised an open letter to The Lancet saying, do not question, this virus is natural. Anyone who says otherwise is a conspiracy theorist. The media ran with that. They said anyone who says it's a lab leak, comes from a lab, is racist. Facebook and social media were censoring people who said that it might be a lab leak.
But the interesting thing is, though, the fact he's saying a leak, whereas, of course, some of the implications from some people were it was deliberately
working
targeted.
in conjunction with the Chinese military to develop these mutant viruses as a bioweapon, which is a very different thing to being just a leak.
So what do we do with this? Now that the Insight team have come up with this, what happens next? You know,
who is the world authority that can sanction China for this?
Yeah, that's anyone's guess, but I think it should make people pause a little bit and think about, should we be doing this kind of research, or should we be more transparent and open about this kind of research? Because it isn't just China. It's the United States and the West funding a lot of this research in China, precisely because it's not transparent. Because possibly it might outrage people if they were doing it in London or something like that. So they are also using China to get around the problem of transparency. And clearly the scientific community doesn't want to have a conversation about that. They would rather shut things down because they think, quite rightly, that it will damage their reputation.
Do you know what scares me about this? And it's all life imitating art and all the rest of it. I'm currently watching on Prime a show called The Last Ship. Which was made in 2014, and it's almost exact.
Yes, it's very good too, isn't it? I've seen that.
But it's this.
Yeah.
It's this.
Yeah, but I mean, experts.
These viruses, pandemics will happen again.
Yes.
These things are going to happen again in the next 10, 20 years. How are we going to respond next time?
Yeah.
The idea of going back through what we've been through in the last 3 years.
And the irony is, if we do assume that this project was, well-intentioned with the plan of saving people from pandemics, I mean, the other, of course, theory is that it could be a bioweapon. But if it was to save people from pandemics, then that shows the dangers of sort of safetyism. The fear of a pandemic brought one about, essentially, which is quite a scary thought.
Hugely ironic, yeah.
Oh, dear. Fraser, let's have a look at the Sunday Telegraph. The BBC wants to curb liberal bias. They want to recruit people with diverse opinions.
Yeah, well, we know...
Shock horror.
We know the BBC is obsessed with every other type of diversity, the superficial kind, skin colour, sexuality, things that really shouldn't matter. And finally, they're thinking of looking into diversity of opinion, because everyone, knows that the BBC has a relatively liberal bias. People say it's left-wing. I don't think that's quite right. And it's not necessarily... It's not as if they campaign for any one party or anything like that, but you can sometimes...
But does this seriously mean they're going to interview candidates for jobs, journalistic type jobs, and grill them about their own political opinions? Because if you're a true journalist, no, that's right. And if you're a journalist wanting to work for the state broadcaster, the BBC, in the world of news, you shouldn't have an opinion.
It's strange, isn't it? Because you should be able to have faith that journalists, or think of other institutions that should be impartial, like the civil service. You should be able to have faith that people can do their jobs and put their biases to the side. I would much rather that than people being grilled for their opinions.
It's about having opinions and being a person, but also being able to report a story and not bringing your biases or your opinions or your own perspectives in. And that's a slightly different thing.
I just don't like the idea of...
so contrived to interview people and
to interview people and then ask them
to sort of fix all these...
Or perhaps they're going to take more people from the Mail and the Telegraph and places like that. And I don't think you can really create that kind of balance. It's kind of a false thing. The world isn't really about that.
But you see, that's what I like about working here. Despite what people on Twitter say and all the rest of it, is they all say, well, you all use all this right wing. I've never worked anywhere before where people so openly disagree with each other.
Exactly. That's honestly the truth about GBNEWS, and I work with lots of different channels. You can actually say what you want here. Yeah. And that's the irony of people telling us that we're raving right-wingers.
Yeah.
No.
Crazy, isn't it?
Can we go to this miracle story story, because this is something worth
Good
celebrating
news.
as well.
Yeah.
It's a family who were flying on a small Cessna aircraft, I think, over the jungle in, what, Chile was it?
Southern Colombia.
Colombia. And the plane crashed.
Plane crashed on the 1st of May. The mother, the pilot, and another adult on board were killed.
So all the adults were killed.
All the adults were killed. 4 children. Honestly, this gives me goosebumps. 4 children were lost, couldn't be found. 40 days later, they've just been found. They were 13, 9, 4, and 10 to 12 months, because they've been lost for nearly 2 months. This baby and all the children survived. It's absolute, and they have this code word, the army code word, when they were looking for them, was miracle. So they said miracle 4 times, 4 children. So beautiful.
The code
4
word
children
meant
found alive.
we found them and we found them alive.
4 of
and they
them.
had to say miracle 4 times.
I know, and apparently the little girl, the 13-year-old little girl, had learnt sort of survival strategies from her grandmother. She knew about certain fruits, berries, poisons that you couldn't eat. The children have been found. They look pretty, they are dehydrated, they're emaciated, all of that.
But they're alive.
No,
2 months later, they're alive.
The baby, I've got a 2-year-old and I don't know how he would survive for half an hour in the kitchen, let alone 40 days in the jungle at the age of 10 to 12 months. He had his first birthday, effectively, in the jungle. And they found them, they're okay. They cut bits up and made little shelters, and this is really,
She knew
real
what fruit
miracle.
to feed her siblings, so they obviously survived on fruit. But that jungle also has tigers in it and poisonous snakes.
Really, really dangerous. Alligators, jaguars, and anacondas. And poisonous insects.
It's a remarkable story.
It is.
They're going to make a movie out
But
of that.
it's such a miracle, but then you think, and they've lost their mother.
Yes, I know.
Yeah. We've got to leave it there. Fraser, Emma, thank you both very much
Thank you.
indeed.